My name is Christine Sabates, and I'm the chairperson of Bee City Kawartha Lakes. On behalf of Bee City Kawartha Lakes and the Pollinator Partnership Canada, I'd like to welcome you all to tonight's webinar, Basics of Native Seed Saving. Native seeds collection has become a highly relevant topic with respect to pollinator conservation. Seed collection can help us overcome the detrimental effects of ongoing fragmentation of native pollinator habitat, both in Ontario and abroad. Ensuring that we preserve and expand upon existing native pollinator habitat is essential to the success of pollinators now and in the future. It also offers significant cost sharing to those of us who choose to expand our own native gardens. What better way to support the international plight of pollinators than to start in our own backyards? I'm pleased to introduce you to Samantha Medeiros, Partnership and Operations Manager at the Pollinator Partnership Canada. Sam is passionate about increasing human relationships with the land. Her study of Indigenous environmental perspectives and practices, public education, community building, and behavioral change have formed a strong foundation that has led her into her current focus of supporting pollinators through the creation of habitats and land stewardship and through sustainable practices. Tonight, Samantha will walk us through the ethics of native seed collecting, when to begin collecting, several collection methods, and storage methods to ensure both the short-term and long-term viability of the seeds that we collect. After her presentation, we will have an opportunity for questions and answers and information sharing. Tonight's presentation is being recorded and will be made available online. We will follow up this session with the second webinar in the new year, focused on seed stratification and winter sowing. So please check back with us for the dates and registration. The City of Kawartha Lakes respectfully acknowledges that we are situated on Mississauga lands and the traditional territory covered by the Williams Treaty. We are grateful for the opportunity to work here, and we thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. We recognize and deeply appreciate their historic connection to this place. And without any further ado, I'd like to just hand this off to Samantha.
All right, let me see if I can get my screen shared in a nice and simple way. Thank you, Christine, for the wonderful introduction. I'm going to go through the basics of native seed saving, and you can take a look at our website, pollinatorpartnership.ca, where we have eco-regional guides, we have some land management guides, and we have this really funky tool. It's a native plant finder that you can use by inputting your postal code and finding native plants that meet the ecosystems around you. So I'll just go a little bit into the details of what we are going to focus on for this webinar. We're going to focus on small scale seed collection for individual and small group use. There are different protocols for scaling up, and sometimes this is a bit more complex. Large scale native plant seed saving requires knowledge and conservation ethics, specific training, extreme accuracy in plant ID, and even sometimes noting locations to the point of specific geolocations. And when it comes to collecting for genetic diversity, there's a little bit more nuance there. So really the focus here is on small individual scale and small group use. The goal here is to empower you to want to learn more and to create native pollinator habitats. I'm going to try to provide some tips and tricks that'll help you in future projects and also cultivate an ethos of respect for the land, respect for the plants, and how to do good work while we're collecting seeds. That was also a very wonderful land acknowledgement, and I've included my own. I'm speaking from Nogojiwanong, Peterborough, Ontario, and we share the same treaties as Kawartha Lakes. I am a settler on Indigenous land, and we are all treaty people, whether we are Indigenous or not. And I want to remind us all that plants are living things, and we must also respect and pay attention and listen to them. Plants have treaty rights, as does wildlife, the waters, and the land. Modern land management practices can sometimes put human beings in the center of all of our systems and focus on controlling those natural systems. Yet we rely on those natural systems that we can't fully control or potentially even comprehend. So, in order for us to do well for ourselves and for nature, we must work in relationship with nature instead of trying to control it or have it adapt and warp to our needs and our specific human centered way of living on this planet. So, being in relationship with those plant species instead of just a taking of is something that is really valuable. And indigenous peoples have cared and tended the earth since time immemorial. They have had a close relationship with non-human living things and often even see those non-human living things as kin and teachers. I would agree that I also see those plants as teachers and the wildlife as teachers. And I would like to try to maybe ask that you try to open your mind up to that perspective. What can plants teach you? What can these seeds teach you? May we continue to work towards being in better balance with these systems by learning and humbling ourselves and working towards goodness in all that we do. And through seed saving and sowing, may that plant kingdom teach us a thing or two about being better humans. So I'll just share a little bit about me. And I've had such a wonderful introduction. I don't think I need to go into all this, but I am a second generation settler Canadian. I would consider myself a DIY based amateur seed saver who has spent I've been seed saving for at least 10 or more years, but I've spent the last 4 to 5 years really honing in on native plants and trying to learn as much as I can about the collecting native seeds specifically. For me, seed collection is largely intuitive. I try to observe what's happening and respect the spaces I'm in and the living things that I'm around. And I really try to listen to what is happening around me. If I am hearing little plants being like, pick me, I'm ready, I try to listen to that and I'm like, pick those seeds and maybe just throw them somewhere else on the land if I don't have plans for growing anything myself. But I try to really just sit with what I'm experiencing around me. And I think that that's a pretty cool way of walking in the world of seed collecting. So I thought I'd just share that little perspective. The last thing I say here is act like a bee. And I've been doing this for many years. I think it's really special that I'm now working for Pollinator Partnership Canada, because if you watch a bee or a butterfly, they'll move from one flower to another, and often from one plant to another plant. They don't just focus on one plant and take all the nectar from that single flower. And what's really important when it comes to seed saving is that we don't just take from one flower, from one plant, that we hover and bounce around like a little bee or a butterfly while we're collecting seeds. And so one takeaway that I'd like you to try to consider when collecting seeds, whether it's for native plants or non-native plants, is act like a bee. I will say that I am deeply grateful and humbled by teachings that have been shared with me and that I've received in both Yukon territories by Trondek-Wet'suwet'en Indigenous peoples, and then in Ontario from Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe traditional knowledge holders. Some people that I want to list specifically include Dan Longboat, Dorothy Taylor, Nicole Bell, Doug Williamsbaum, and Terry Lynn Brandt. Also Liz Osawamik. All right, so our outline. Why native plants? Ethics of seed collection, materials needed, when to collect, plant profiles for transferable knowledge, collection methods, and storage for short and long-term viability. I've got a lot of stuff to go through, and I hope I can do it in good time. I hope we have time for a question and answer and for discussion where we can share our own tips and tricks and maybe some things that you can teach me that I don't quite know about. I'm always learning, and I think that that's a lot of the fun for me of going out and being with these plants. I will say the plant profiles for transferable knowledge, I've tried to group the certain plants together based on how we harvest seed for them. And I think that this is really valuable because it's really hard to learn everything about every single plant. But if we can learn the basics of what plants are giving us and what they need when they give us their seed, then we can kind of apply that knowledge through different species or plants that are within similar families or have similar seed giving qualities. Did you know that there's over 4,000 native bee species in North America? My brain exploded when I learned that. And that is just, there's so many different relationships between different native plants. There's so many different habitat requirements for all of these species. And I just wanted to expand that a little bit for us not to just think about bumblebees or monarch butterflies. And some people would even, only think about honeybees, which are not native to Canada. So take a look at this poster, and I'm not absolutely certain on this, but these drawings of bees are to scale between one another. So there's a bee here called the fairy bee, and it is about the size of the eye of this bee over here. And I just want to put that into perspective because there are so many different sizes and so many different skills and specialties that different bees have. So when we're collecting seed, try to think about that diversity in the plants we choose and the plants we learn about. So, not all pollinators have specific one-to-one unique relationships between plants, but some do. And all of these different relationships, at least on Turtle Island or in Canada, have developed over a long time. So if we didn't have native plants, then there might be some micronutrients or some specific resources that we wouldn't have available. There also might not be host plants available for certain plants, for certain pollinators to be successful. There are also certain plants that keep themselves so tightly shut, the flowers keep themselves so tightly shut that only the strength of a big bumblebee can open up that flower to get inside and pollinate. And there's just such a diversity that we can learn about. And I just wanted to share that the plants I'm going to talk about are just the tip of the iceberg of native plants. And native plants are really important because they have ecosystem services that non-native species are not necessarily adapted to do. So they might provide services like erosion reduction, flood control. They can provide medicines for us and for wildlife. And they also provide food for birds and enhance our food systems as pollinators are enhanced by the flowers and other plants, flowering trees and shrubs. The most exciting thing for me about collecting seeds is that anyone can do it. You don't need much money. You don't need any money, I would argue. And kids can do it, adults can do it, people with mobility concerns can do it. To me, it is the most fun thing to just watch someone really watch a plant and get excited about what they're seeing, especially over time, from the bud to the bloom to the seed to then that seed becoming a new plant. So of course, collecting seeds, there's different levels of complexity for the types of plants we collect seed from and the methods we use. If your scale is looking to be large scale and your end goals are to plant massive amounts of habitat, you're going to have a more complex system than the DIY based accessible system that I'm kind of talking about here. But this is really just to help you kind of like get excited and learn more, and hopefully you will be as addicted as I am when it comes to seed saving. This is the time of year where all of my tables have little paper bags on them full of seeds, and I haven't yet found homes for everything, but hopefully they will go somewhere. Some things to just pay attention to when we're collecting seeds for safety is always check for ticks after you've left the field, look where you step and be aware of your surroundings. Don't go harvesting seeds in a place that might be dangerous. It's really not worth it. So watch for wild parsnip, giant hogweed, and poison ivy, because that is not fun. And always let someone know if you're going somewhere really deep into the wilderness. Just good practice. I'll go over this bottom piece of this slide in the next one, but just be sure to pick from areas of abundance. Try to pick from pesticide-free areas, and always listen to a yes or a no. Ask permission from landowners and land managers, but also pay attention to what your intuition's telling you. If you get a no, maybe we should be listening to that. So the first thing I say here, my favorite slide is the ethics of seed collection. I think we get really excited and caught up in collecting seeds, but we don't necessarily think about what we're going to do afterwards or how we're collecting the seeds. So I really want to take a moment and talk about this. I think this is the most important slide. Always ask permission from the land, like I said, but also the people, and really pay attention to a no. If you get a no in your mind, don't pick it. Take only from spaces that have a healthy population, which means multiple individuals in a large stand. One teaching I received was that the first plant you see is the plant you should not take seed from, or take medicine from, or take from. That's like the mother plant, the leader plant, who shows you the rest of the plants. If you see a plant that you're really excited to take seed from, you say, oh, wow, that's a black-eyed Susan right there. I'm really excited. Just say thank you. Just walk on and look for more black-eyed Susans. Chances are there will be many more. And if there's not, then maybe you were just supposed to see that one. Try to listen to that. And one thing that I'm still working on and have done better over the years is to take only what you need and what you're going to use. Sometimes I get excited and I collect way more than I need or will use. And this is where seed libraries and seed swaps and friends can come in handy, because honestly, nothing feels worse than having a bunch of seeds that are 7 years old or older, and you just discovered them and maybe 20% actually survive. So take only what you're going to use, let the rest of it go back to nature, and chalk it up to experience if you've already done this, because I have. Again, take a little bit from each plant, collect like a bee or a butterfly. Never take all seeds from a single area, and do not collect from endangered or rare species in the wild. We want those species to be successful where they stand. They might have very specific and nuanced growing conditions that we can't mimic. So it's better to just let those plants be where they are. Some other considerations that I like to do is to cultivate a little bit of reciprocity while I'm collecting seeds. So maybe I collect some seeds and I hold some extras in my hand, or I shove them in my hair, or put them in my pockets. And then when I go somewhere else, I just scatter the seeds just somewhere else in nature. And I think that plants want to spread their seeds, they want to move. So the best thing we can do to say thank you is to help them move a little bit further. Also, build a relationship with the plants. I think that it's really overwhelming to learn everything you can about every single plant. So take a small bite and learn about 1 or 2 plants each year. Treat them like your friend and learn about what their favorite habitat is, what kind of plants or what kind of pollinators or what kind of birds might use them. Learn about what they like, what they don't like, and then go from there. It makes the overwhelm of trying to learn everything a little bit easier. So actually, I'll stick to this slide for a second, because the image I have here is a photo that just kind of shows the difference of when things are ready throughout the year. Here we see a columbine seed head that's completely dried and there are seeds in there that are ready to be collected or ready to go into the earth. Yet beside it, there are black-eyed Susan buds that haven't even bloomed yet. So this is all to say that you can collect seeds at any time of year, and there's going to be different things ready at different times of year. So if you miss your window of seed collection, you might have to wait next year for that specific plant, but you will have other plants to collect. Don't worry about it. I think most people have the same type of materials in their repertoire of what they use. I always carry a paper bag and a basket with me. I carry a marker or some sort of writing utensil. Some other things are garden gloves and pruning shears. Garden gloves are good for black-eyed Susans because they can be a little bit spiky, and milkweed sap can be a little dangerous at times. So I think it's good practice. If you don't use gloves, it's not the end of the world, but be safe and make sure you know what you're touching. You can carry other kinds of storage containers, but the basket is really just to keep all my paper bags together for what I've collected. Later on, we'll talk about what you need for storing seed after they've been processed, but that includes things like jars and envelopes, bowls and funnels, or sieves. We'll talk about that later. This is the big one. Always label your seeds. Label it when you are collecting it in the field, and label it after you have gone through all your seeds and processed them, because too much information is always better than not enough once you have planted your plants, once you are trying to give them to friends, etc. So most importantly, when you're labeling seeds, include the species name and the variety, the location and year harvested, who and where you got it from. In the future, you might want to know the growing conditions that you found that plant under, and maybe what kind of year those plants were living under. Was it a drought year? Was it a very wet year? Was it a really sunny year or a shady year? Maybe you see that they're resistant to some sort of pest or disease that's nearby. This is all information that's really helpful in the future. And I just want to make a note about how important documenting things are, because whether you're harvesting seed for yourself or a personal garden or conservation project, there's a bunch of information that helps you in tracking when, what, where, and how that can help you do better in the future. So if you know exactly what you harvested, where, and how that plant is going to grow best, you will be more successful. You can ensure that seeds are processed and stored and used at the right time and in the right place. So that reduces your guesswork and just makes things more enjoyable in the future. So yes, always label your seeds in the fields and after processing. Here's a little game, and I don't know how we're going to make this happen, but maybe just in your mind, think about which one of these works really well and which one of these doesn't work so well. There are things that are really great about most of these, and then there are things that I will admit I could have done better. So on the left, we have somebody who has given black-eyed Susan seeds, and they've actually done quite a good job because they put the common name, the Latin name, Rudbeckia hirta, and the year the seeds were collected and where. This is another example. Morning Glory is not native, but the year it was collected, the type of season it was when these plants were collected, and how well they did. They were container grown. And I also noted here that it was from packaged seeds. Not necessary all the time, but as you can see in the next example with Boston marrow squash, if we just wrote that Kelly gave these to us, we would lose the history that this is actually original squash from Seneca Haudenosaunee peoples. And this is really valuable because with certain plants, we might want to know what that lineage is and where they come from. So it can be a little complicated, but if you're interested in doing that extra step, then writing from Kelly, gifted by Aaron, from from Seneca Haudenosaunee Nation first, like just listing all of this gives you a whole story behind what's here. And lastly, this is the example that I think could be done better. And I'll admit that this is just me being really excited about some different species of asters I saw. I wrote where I got them. I wrote when I got them, but I did not ID the plants. And so are these calico asters? Is it New England aster? Is it Heath aster? Is it a mix of multiple asters? I'm not sure. And so when I plant these seeds, I'm going to have to be careful and try to really ID what's happening while the seeds are growing so that I don't unintentionally plant something that I might not have wanted to plant. I think if you're properly IDing things and you're not worried too much about the species, it's not the end of the world. But if you've mistakenly picked seed from a non-native species like a type of fleabane and it's mixed into your asters, now we're kind of getting into tricky territory where we're unintentionally spreading seed that we might not want there. So I just want to show these examples of ways that we can label and things that we want to kind of work on. You know, trying to identify things as descriptively as we can and making sure that we have the right plant IDs. So, super fun. When to collect. For me, like I said before, you want to collect when the plants are giving their seeds to you. So I'm going to use my cursor here to show that some of these plant seed heads are ready to go, but some of these are less ready. And so, of course, I would just harvest seed from the stalks that are dying and dead, and that these seeds are just, when you touch them, they just pop right off because those seeds are ready to go. They're literally giving themselves to you to be harvested. So in the next couple slides, I'm going to highlight some species based on the types of ways that you would collect their seeds, which is going to help you just transfer the knowledge like I talked about earlier. These species are all considered common in Ontario, but it's important to know that even if a plant is considered common, it might not be common in that specific area. So follow ethics on abundance and harvesting when you can know for sure that there are healthy populations nearby. Also, pay attention to bloom periods. When I talk about these plant profiles, it's going to give you a bit of a time period that these plants will be blooming or ready for seed collection at. But bloom periods are affected by weather, climate, specific things that are happening in the ecosystem. So it's never cut and dry. Really, we have to pay attention to natural cycles and visual indicators for seed collection. If you see a plant that, well, I'll say this in the next slide. So notes on seed collection. Different plants are ready at different times of the year. And while most of the plants that I talk about today are ready right around now, some plants are ready at other times. Some drop their seeds really quickly, and if you miss the window, you have to wait for the next season, but some plants are quite forgiving, and you can even harvest them in late winter or even the spring sometimes. You won't have many seeds, but sometimes you can find some. What I was going to say earlier was keep an eye on your plants. So if you see a really healthy plant that's like the candidate that is really the kind of plant you want to collect seed from, especially if you're trying to create strong, hardy plants, mark them with a string while they're still blooming, a compostable string. Try not to put plastic in the ecosystem, but mark them with some sort of marker and check in often so that when that plant is done, you've already ID'd them, the seeds are ready, you can harvest them with confidence and know that that is a great individual plant that you want to harvest seed from. All right, so I'm going to go into these plant profiles and start with milkweed. Host plant for monarch butterflies, and actually some other species really use milkweeds as well. But if you're harvesting milkweed and you get way too excited and put the pods with tiny little cracks in your bag, they will open and you will get fluff everywhere. So when you're harvesting milkweed, it's best to try to process the plant seeds right away and avoid this chaos that is now going to be dispersed all over your home. So one thing people do to try to like fudge the system is they put little elastic bands around seed pods that look really healthy right before they split open. And then that keeps all the fluff connected and makes it easier to just take the seeds off the fluff. If the fluff has expanded, I learned something really cool from our lovely host today, that you can use an envelope with a little hole cut in it and then kind of work the seeds inside that envelope if you put all the fluff in there, and the seeds will just fall out of that little hole and the fluff will stay in the envelope for you to just disperse outside in nature. So, I mean, people can screenshot this. I will provide some recordings. There's a lot of information in all these plant profiles, but I want us to try to think about what are the common things that we're seeing. For milkweed, you collect seed pods as they turn yellow or grayish brown and they begin to split. Seeds should be brown and plump when they're ready. You don't want seeds that are thin and flimsy or have holes in them. Those won't be very successful plants. So milkweed sap can be a medicine at times, but is also mildly toxic. And so it would be a good idea to take care when you're handling milkweed plants. You really don't want that sap in your eyes. And if it gets in your eyes, it can cause a lot of irritation and it might even cause some cloudiness in your eye that takes a week or so to clear up. So it's important to just be mindful of taking care of yourself when you're harvesting and wear some gloves, don't touch your face, and wash your hands carefully after handling milkweed pods or plants, just so that you're not going to get this sap in a place that might harm you. So I went on a walk and tried to take lots of photos while I was seed saving for this workshop, and I wanted to share things that made me a little bit, well, it was a good example of what we maybe should not do when we're harvesting seeds. So on the far right and the far left photo, you'll see the very tops of the milkweed plants totally cut off. And I'm not, maybe someone can share later on why this might be, but I was assuming the goal was to collect the milkweed pods. And the one on the far left, you know, I saw about 4 or 5 milkweed plants around, but all of them just had their tops cut off and there were no pods left anywhere near these plants. That's not the best protocol because there's potential that those plants won't continue next year, and now there are no seeds that have been dropped in that area. So we want to leave a few pods on each plant. The goal is to continue the life of these plants, not to harm the life of the existing plants. This example on the far right is similar, where the pods are kind of, there's 2 pods here, which is much better. Somebody did leave those, but the top of the plant was also chopped off, and I've just been very curious to know what that reasoning is. The plant in the middle is swamp milkweed, and I did see this plant absolutely ready to go to seed. In fact, it's already gone to seed and the seeds are dispersed. You know, I didn't see too many swamp milkweed around and the seeds were already doing their thing. So you could take 2 or 3 of those seeds, but really I think that those seeds should just continue being in nature, especially because there's not that many swamp milkweed around. So again, don't harvest from areas with low populations. Don't harvest all the seed heads or pods from all the plants around you, and try to treat the existing plants with care and respect. Beware of lookalike pods. I know most of you can probably identify milkweed pods, but dog strangling vine looks very similar when it has gone to seed. And actually the seeds look extremely similar. If you look here and you go here, it's hard to see, but dog strangling vine seeds and milkweed seeds look very similar. You can learn more about dog strangling vine, which is considered an invasive species, on the Ontario website for invasive species, but it's really important that if you're out there collecting seeds, you make sure that you're collecting the right species and that you're not potentially spreading unwanted seeds from plants that can do a lot of harm to our ecosystem. All right, so the next grouping that I've done are plants that bloom kind of late in the fall or in the late summer and provide resources to a lot of different insects. Asters, goldenrods, and pearly everlasting are examples of seeds that fly away. Milkweeds kind of also fly away, but for the purposes of this, let's just go with this. So, New England asters. The seed is ready for collection when the white fluff begins to dry and expand, and the stem and the base of the flower head begins to brown. You can cut the entire flower head off and have it, and then separate everything when you get home so things don't blow away. But the seeds, when they come off the head of the plant, they should be dark in color and full of life. Like it says plump on the slide, but you'll begin to look, once you observe things, you'll begin to see what seeds look like. Oh yeah, that seed's ready. And when you're collecting a seed, you're like, oh, that's not ready. Oops. So flat seeds indicate that the embryo has not developed yet and the seeds are not ripe. So we're going to see this a lot through the next couple slides, and it'll just show you how New England asters, goldenrods, pearly everlasting, they kind of all have very similar structures, especially when it comes to the seed collection side of things. Flat top aster, the same thing. I know this is a lot to read and write down, so I'll just provide a recording later, and if people really wanted it, I could provide slides. This is really just to give you an idea of what they need. So for pearly everlasting, the seed is ready for collection when the white fluff begins to dry and expand, and the stem begins to brown. It's the same thing as asters. Seed should be dark in color and plump. Flat seeds indicate the embryo is not developed and the seeds are not ripe. Same with goldenrod. So I used grass leaf goldenrod, but this can go for Canada goldenrod, gray stem goldenrod, and many others. The seeds ripen about a month after flowering, so keep an eye on those plants once they're flowered. And you can collect the seed when the fluff begins to dry and expand. And sometimes if you look at a goldenrod, it looks like it's ready, but it's not quite ready. So do a little test look and leave it for a little bit longer. I'm going to share in this next slide, some other considerations when harvesting. And I'm going to go on mute just because I'm going to show a little video. So in this stand, we also have goldenrod. Really beautiful plant, really awesome late season bloomer. None of these plants are really absolutely ready to give their seeds. And so if you come in close here, you can see that some of them just beginning to, you know, the flowers are red, but the fluffs are just starting. So you can pick some of these. They're not quite ready, so I would leave them. And here's another really good point. When you're collecting seed, you don't want to pick plants that are less healthy or that are maybe being attacked by an insect or or some other kind of ailment. So if you look at this plant, I actually wouldn't be harvesting from these goldenrods because they have galls on them. Now, galls aren't bad necessarily. That means that there's actually an insect in here, an insect egg that's going to be developing and growing. Not always a bad thing, but it indicates that the plant isn't as healthy as it could be. And when we're saving seed and thinking about the next generation of plants that we're going to want, that we're helping, you know, live into the future, we want to have the strongest, most viable specimens that can resist kinds of bacteria and things like that. So this is just an example of maybe a plant that I wouldn't choose to save seed from, but galls are perfectly natural and an everyday part of goldenrods. Yeah, so just be mindful of looking for any infestations, galls, deformities, or anything that might suggest that the plants are in less than fantastic health. This is another example of a plant that's been stunted, probably from another form of gall. And so I wouldn't harvest plant seed from those plants. The next family are seed heads that are collected and crushed. That includes things like brown-eyed Susans, bergamot, lots of types of flowers, and echinacea. I think these plants are the most important when it comes to really making sure that the flowers that you bring in, the flower heads that you bring in, are dried, because it makes getting the seed out of the head a lot easier. So for black-eyed Susan, it's important to harvest when the cone of the plant, the base of the plant, has become hard, or sorry, the cone is the top of the plant, but when it's become hard and it turns almost gray or dark brown, if you touch it and push your hands up against the cone of the plant, the seeds might just fall, like pop right off, and that'll tell you that the seeds are ripe. Once dry, you're going to, gently pull apart the cones and dislodge any remaining seeds. I'm going to share bergamot next, but I want you to note how this method is different, because these seeds you have to really kind of move from the head, and black-eyed Susans can be a little spiky, so be careful with that. But bergamot is going to be a little different. Once you get to know the plants and the seed heads, you'll know just by looking at the head of the plant how those seeds want to come out, and it'll be a little bit more intuitive for you, but this takes time and paying attention. So I'm helping you by just giving you these little pointers. Yeah, if you observe what's happening just over time, you'll learn the best way to harvest these seeds. So for wild bergamot, if harvested at a good time, the seeds will just fall out naturally, and you don't have to crush and dry so much for the remaining seeds. But your seeds are ready to be harvested when the flower head goes completely brown, and you can just take the flower head and tap the flower heads upside down on a piece of paper or over a bowl, and the seeds just fall out. Then you can use your hands and crush the rest of the seed heads to get the rest out. So this right here is bergamot, and you can see that these little, I'm not sure what the word is, but you can see that these are all just holding seeds. You just flip that upside down and lots of little seeds will come out. This is one of my favorite groupings of plants. And again, it's milkweeds are kind of both like plants that fly away and pods. So, but these are kind of all different pods. Evening primrose is awesome because it also provides habitat. It's a host plant for the primrose moth, but it has hollow stems, which is great for certain bees that use hollow stems to live. All those solitary bee hotels that people purchase, plant some evening primrose and you're creating natural habitat for those bees. So penstemon and foxglove beard tongues are also pod type plants. The two beard tongues and columbines are more like spring, midsummer, late summer seeds that you can harvest, but evening primrose will be ready around now. And you'll be able to see when the evening primrose seeds are ready because the capsule will go from totally green to grayish brown, and sometimes it'll even start to pop open. At that point is when I usually harvest it, but sometimes you can harvest them a little earlier when the capsules are still closed. And when you dry it at home on a flat space with some airflow, the capsules will open more. And you can just crush the seeds. You can just crush the capsules with a sieve underneath in a bowl, and all of the seeds will kind of fall through the sieve, and your extra plant material will stay on top. I I usually just harvest when the seeds are ready, straight from nature, and I don't really spend too much time drying the pods because a lot of it has been done naturally. You can also dry them in a paper bag and just shake it around every once in a while, and I find that that works fine for my purposes. Hairy beard tongue is the same, or penstemon beard tongue. They're, a lot of the foxglove beard tongue, they kind of work the same way. The seeds will ripen in upright capsules and they'll go brown when they're ready to harvest. And you could just turn them upside down and empty them right into an envelope if the pods have already opened, or just pinch the pods and they will burst open. So make sure you have a little bag or something to collect all those little baby seeds. This is an example of evening primrose seeds, and all the little guys that come out of those. And I'll talk a little bit about how to collect in the next one, but see, I've got a sieve here. I don't know what I was collecting at this point, but sieve, and in the bottom is like the actual seeds. So this plant material is just all extra. So when we're collecting seeds, we're going to collect mature seeds from healthy plants. Some plants can be shaken or gently crushed. I've already gone through this. Fluff separated, and some have pods. Be careful not to collect insects. That's when we're out in the field, like, just watch what you're doing, because you're gonna maybe get some aphids, you're gonna maybe get a spider or two. I have definitely collected earwigs while collecting milkweed seed pods, and it's a big surprise, a little surprise. You also don't want them to eat your seeds after you've gone through all that work of collecting them. If you remove the fluff and plant materials while you're already outside, or as much of it as you can, it just reduces the chance of mold and helps you sow seeds later without them potentially blowing away. All right, drying seeds. So like I said, you'll increase chances of mold if you don't dry your seeds. I usually just cure my seeds with a paper bag or a flat surface, but you can put them in a bowl and kind of shift them around every once in a while if you don't have a ton of seeds, or some sort of screen, a few days or a week. Once you get the feel of it, you'll know. Just keep an eye out, and if you're not sure if they're dry enough, then you should probably wait a little bit longer. Like I said, any flowers are probably the most important when it comes to drying the seeds. You want the seed heads to be totally dry, and you don't want any chance of mold going into your plants. So the drier they are, the more you can crush the flower heads and get more seeds from. This is my favorite part. I collect all the extra materials when I'm processing seeds, and you can see there's like a whole wildflower mix right here. So any chaff or excess plant material that I get from, sometimes I'll just like blow into the bowl, and the extra materials, the seeds are pretty heavy, so the extra materials just fly out. All of that I just keep in a bowl and I toss it outside right before the snow hits the ground. And it's always a pretty exciting thing to see if any native plants will show up when I do that. So for storing your plants, we're gonna need anything from glass jars, envelopes, zip baggies, or little seed packets. I thought I would share, it's gonna be in a couple slides, so I'll let you know about that. But I'll go into kind of like the differences between each of these materials, but paper bags, envelopes, plastic bags, jars, they all serve a different purpose and are good for different terms of seed saving. So if you're gonna be storing seeds, the first step is to collect as little non-seed plant material as possible. I've already talked about that. Remove what seed you can get. You remove what seed you can as soon as you get back from collecting, fluff, leaves, and stems, and then dry the materials. When you're collecting as much seed as you can without extra plant materials, that reduces your chance of collecting insects, molds, or other contaminants. And drying your seeds helps with viability. So if the seeds are dry, they'll ripen and they'll just have a better chance at being successful in the future. All seeds should be stored in an airtight container with inside a cool, dry, and dark location. Having a consistent temperature, if possible, is really valuable because you might accidentally have plants start germinating if they think that the winter has stopped and now it's spring. So you don't want plants starting to germinate in your seed collection. Avoid moisture, light, contamination. You don't want to attract mice to your seeds either. So that's why keeping them in jars or plastic containers is really valuable. And avoid temperature fluctuations. Paper, plastic, and glass. Well, it depends on how long you're storing it for. Paper, you can keep seed packets in a sealed container and away from moisture. So you can have multiple packets all together, and that can last a few months to a couple years. I have some in paper packets that have lasted me up to 5 years, but I think then we might want to think about plastic or glass. Plastic reduces extra air, so it's good for 2 to 3 years, but glass is best. If you're hoping to save seed for as long as possible, a jar with as little airflow as possible can last seeds up to 7 or more years. Just a small little DIY I thought I'd share is you can take some old envelopes and just cut them. You can probably make about 3 of these, and you could fold them or you can tape the sides, but you put all your seeds in here. You put the information you need on your seed pack, and you can tape or fold your little envelope seed pack up. And it's great because this costs no money. You're using a recycled material, old envelopes from bills, and you can share them at seed swaps, at seed libraries. And this is my favorite way to just collect seed and give them out at no extra cost of my own. Just make sure that you don't have any personal information on your envelopes. I think that's pretty straightforward. I mean, you can get creative. There's lots of ways to make little packages. I thought I'd share that idea. And we're done for this presentation. I want to give credit to Amber Barnes for helping me with some preliminary research, and her seed saving plant profiles kind of helped me in the direction that I wanted to go with all the information that I wanted to share with everyone. And Terry Lynn Brandt is a lecturer from many years ago when I was at Trent University, who really informed my ethics and the relationships that we can create with plants. The idea about learning 1 or 2 plants a year and trying to just treat them like friends and learn everything you can about your new friend before moving to the next friend was Terry Lynn's idea, and I really valued that and wanted to share that. So thank you to everybody who's helped me in making this presentation and in the work that we do moving forward. So thank you, everybody, and I'll just end there.
I'd like to just interject and thank you for that wonderful presentation. Very informative. I think I can safely say we all learned something new tonight. And yeah, going forward, if anyone has a question, a hack, anything they would like to share, I just ask that you raise your hand. And then once I give you the go ahead, just please feel free to turn your mic and your video back on and speak. And I just ask that everyone limit it to one person talking at a time, just so that we can all understand.
Somebody maybe gave some reason for why the tops of the milkweed plants were chopped off. And if they're trying to feed captive monarch caterpillars, I can be a little kinder about that, I guess, because I was very shocked to just see all the tops chopped off. But I would still say that maybe chop the tops off of one plant and leave the rest around there to be successful in the future. But thank you, Jude, for that piece of knowledge for me.
Okay. It doesn't look like there are any questions, so at this point, I think we'll end things. Again, big thank you, Samantha, for taking the time to gather all this information and articulate it so nicely for us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks everybody for being here, for listening. I hope you all found something helpful and something inspiring, and that you can get out and do some good in the plant world.
That's great. All
All right.
right. Thanks, everyone.